Okay, so, when we decided to do a deep dive on parking valets, I got to admit, I was a little skeptical. Like, how much is there really to say about parking cars, right?
Right.
But then we got our hands on this RoleCatcher guide, and let me tell you, it totally changed my perspective. It turns out there's this whole hidden world behind the scenes of valet parking that most of us never even think about.
Yeah, it's funny how we just kind of hand over our keys without a second thought, right?
Totally.
You know.
Totally. It's like you pull up to a restaurant, maybe it's a Friday night, you're trying to impress your date, you tip the valet, hope they don't scratch your car, and that's about it.
Exactly.
But this guide, this RoleCatcher guide, really dives into like the actual day-to-day realities of the job, the good, the bad, even the unexpected. Like, did you know it's not just about having a clean driving record?
No kidding. I mean, you're dealing with customers sometimes in kind of stressful situations, figuring out the logistics on the fly. And, these days you got to be pretty tech savvy too.
Oh yeah, the tech stuff. We're going to get into that a little bit later because it's really fascinating. But first I do want to touch on some of those realities that you mentioned. Like, the guide doesn't sugarcoat it. It's like long hours, working outside in all kinds of weather, and yeah, you're going to have to deal with your fair share of difficult customers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's not always, glamorous. But honestly, one of the things I found appealing is that you don't need years of school to get started, right?
Right.
You can get your foot in the door pretty quickly. And, for some people, that flexibility is a huge plus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was something that really stood out to me too. Like, the barrier to entry is so low. It's like you could be, I don't know, picking up a valet shift as a side hustle one week, and then the next thing you know, you're like a parking pro.
Right. And that's huge, especially, in today's world where people are changing careers more often. Having options where you don't need, like, tons of upfront education is really valuable.
Definitely, definitely. But, okay, let's be real. When we think career progression, parking valet doesn't usually top the list, right?
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something we really want to dig into today, because the guide, it actually lays out this whole path for upward mobility.
Yeah.
Like, who knew that was even a thing?
Oh, yeah. This isn't your parents' parking garage anymore. I mean, remember that tech aspect we mentioned? Buckle up, because valet parking is about to get a serious tech upgrade.
Okay, so speaking of tech...
I know, it's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it.
Yeah.
We're so used to hailing rides with our phones, ordering groceries online, all that.
Yeah.
And now parking is getting that same, tech makeover.
Yeah, and the RoleCatcher guide actually mentioned this company, Park Mobile.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing some really cool stuff with, like, license plate recognition.
Right.
If you pull into the garage,
They scan your plate.
automatically checks you in based on your plate.
You're good to go.
No more tickets. No
Yeah.
more, like, digging for change at a meter in the rain. It does sound pretty utopian. But where do the actual, like, human valets fit into this, like, automated parking future?
Right.
Are we all just going to be handing our keys over to robots?
Yeah. Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime we talk about tech and jobs, it's like, are the robots going to take over?
Right.
But here's the thing with this parking tech. It's not necessarily about replacing jobs. It's actually creating this whole new opportunity for valets to, move up.
Hold on, really?
Yeah.
So it's less about valet to unemployment line and more like valet to dot management.
Exactly. Think about it. Somebody's got to manage all these automated systems, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, troubleshoot any issues, make sure everything's running smoothly.
Yeah.
And who better to do that than someone who's, been there, done that in the parking trenches?
That makes total sense. They've seen it all. They've probably parallel parked a bus at some point in their career.
Right. Plus, they've got those, top-notch customer service skills.
Right.
So some frustrated drivers trying to figure out the parking app, no problem for a seasoned valet who's dealt with, every difficult customer interaction under the sun.
Totally, totally. So it's like the tech is taking over the more, routine stuff.
Right.
Which frees up the humans to handle the complex stuff. The stuff that requires, actual problem solving and people skills.
Exactly. And that's where those upward mobility paths come in that we were talking about earlier. The RoleCatcher guide, they had some pretty interesting examples. You've got your shift supervisor roles.
Right.
But it can go way beyond that, like event management, logistics coordination. I even saw training new hires on the latest parking tech.
Wow. See, I would have never thought about that. Like, the person parking my car tonight could be running the whole operation in a few years. Okay, maybe that's a bit dramatic.
Sure.
But I never really thought of it as like a career path,
Right. It really shows how important it is to look beyond the surface of any job.
Total.
There's always something more to it than meets the eye.
Totally. Okay, speaking of opportunities, let's say one of our listeners is thinking about a career change after listening to this.
Okay.
They're dusting off their driving gloves, ready to trade their cubicle for a parking podium.
Yeah.
What's that one interview question they absolutely need to be prepared to knock out of the park? Well, the RoleCatcher guide had this whole section on acing the valet interview.
Oh, yeah.
There was this one question that really jumped out at me as like the make or break question, you know?
Okay.
How would you handle a difficult customer who's unhappy with the service?
Ah, yeah, that's a good one.
Classic for a reason, right?
Definitely. It's not just about parking cars. You got to know how to handle those tricky situations.
Exactly, exactly.
But,
Because anyone can be, all smiles and charm when everything's going smoothly.
right.
But it's those tough customer interactions where you really see someone's, like, true colors, their professionalism.
Totally. And I bet interviewers are also looking for that self-awareness. Like, it's not enough to just say, oh, I'd be polite, or I try to make them happy, right?
Right.
They want to know you've actually thought about these situations and you have a plan.
Yeah, like, what's your strategy?
Yeah.
Are you going to offer them, like, a free car wash and hope for the best?
Exactly. So the RoleCatcher guide actually recommends using something called the STAR method.
Oh, the STAR method. I've heard of this.
Yeah, it stands for situation, task, action, result. It's basically a way to structure your answer using a real-life example.
Yeah, break that down for us.
Okay, so instead of just giving some vague hypothetical answer,
Right.
you'd actually describe a specific situation you've been in, right? Like where you had to deal with a tough customer.
Okay.
Then you outline the task at hand.
Okay.
Like, what were you trying to accomplish? What action did you take? And then, most importantly, what was the result?
So it's all about showing, not telling, right?
Exactly. Giving them that concrete evidence.
Like a valet highlight reel?
Exactly.
I love that. And the best part is, this STAR method, it's not just for valet interviews.
Right. Absolutely not.
It's something you can use for any job interview where you're trying to demonstrate those, those key skills and experience.
For sure. For sure. It's universal.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. Started off thinking, parking valets, really?
Yeah.
And now, look at us. We've gone from underestimating parking valets
Right.
to realizing they're, like, on the front lines of a tech revolution,
Absolutely.
navigating these crazy customer interactions.
It's a wild ride.
And, of course, climbing that career ladder in ways we never even considered.
It's just all about perspective, right?
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
So I think the big takeaway here is never judge a job by its cover. Take a closer look. You might be surprised by what you find. And hey, who knows? Maybe this deep dive will inspire some of our listeners to do a little exploring of their own.
I hope so.
Because there's a whole world of hidden complexities out there just waiting to be discovered. All right, until next time, keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.